How many of you guys have a story that goes something like this in your life? You're going about your day, and you begin to talk to somebody. Maybe you know them well, maybe you don't know them super well, and it's a good conversation, but then suddenly out of nowhere, they leap to a massive assumption about you, and it shuts the conversation down. Maybe it's an assumption about your job, or your values, or your background, or your health. And in a split second, the whole tone of the conversation changes. You go from being seen as a person to being reduced to what they think about you. Anybody have that experience? Life talking to somebody? A lot of hands going up. It's very, very common. Maybe it sounds like you are pitching this new idea to a coworker, and they assume that you are, by pitching that idea, choosing sides in the office politics. And you're thinking, no, I'm just trying to contribute to the company. I'm not trying to play your game. Or maybe it's when you tell your partner that you've been more interested in going to a church lately, and they respond by saying, that's fine, but I don't believe in that stuff, and I do not want our money going there. And you're thinking, I didn't even say anything about you. I didn't say anything about our money. Or maybe you tell someone that you like a certain sport, and they get really passionate all of a sudden. They start telling you players' names and stats, and you're like, oh gosh, I don't like it that much. But now I don't want to look dumb. I know a guy who told a congregation that he loved the Kansas City Chiefs, and they assumed that he did not like the Bengals. It was you guys. You're the reason we're doing this series. I love the Bengals, and I just so happen to contribute to the Chiefs game referee management fund. I know what you're thinking. It's tax deductible, don't worry. And you guys pay my salary, so really, what about the situation of the young adult who's talking to their parents, and their parents think you're the exact same now as you were when you were 15? The parents didn't bother to get to know the person as their story unfolds. When this kind of assuming happens in your life, how do you react? What does it do to you? Does it make you more open? Does it make you more engaged in the conversation? Or does it shut you down and make you defensive? The thread in all of those stories is that there was someone who did not properly listen, someone who didn't slow down and ask questions. Instead, they made assumptions that changed the whole dynamic of that one conversation and potentially even the entire relationship itself. And we live in a day and age when most people would agree that listening has a certain power that comes with it. There's one author who said, being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable. Practically everybody you meet would say, yes, listening is a skill that is worth mastering. And despite that, most of us are terrible, terrible listeners. And there's a toll this poor listening takes on our relationship. And there's even a toll it takes, science is showing, on our physical and emotional well-being. Starting back in 2003, there were a series of studies that were launched that showed that there is an overlap in the brain circuitries that register physical pain and the brain circuitries that register emotional pain. That both of these forms of pain begin to light up similar circuitries in your brain. And your nervous system has a sensory-seeking system that basically it's constantly scanning. It's like a sonar, and it's invisible. It's under the surface, and it's just constantly ding, 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 and it is searching for safety. It searches for physical safety. It searches and assesses for emotional and social safety, and scientists call this phenomena neuroception. It's an important word. It's like perception when you perceive of something, except it's the step before. It's a subconscious form of perception where you are constantly assessing and you don't even realize it. Am I safe? And on top of looking for physical safety, this neuroceptive system, it is looking for potential breaches in connection in your relationships with other people. So it could look for a certain tone of voice or a certain look on someone's face, a dismissive comment, or a hurtful assumption being made. It searches for times when you feel interrupted or when you perceive that you are not very interesting to this person. And what happens is your brain registers the emotional pain of I'm not being heard, similarly to the way it registers the physical fear of I might not be safe right here. It activates the same alarm system in your body, and it sets you up to do something about it. Now, from an evolutionary perspective, you might think, well, that kind of makes sense because there was once a time when being isolated was a huge threat. Because if you're alone and you don't have your clan and your community, that is a dangerous place to be. But from a theological perspective, you can think all the way back to Genesis when God makes humans and he says, it is not good for this human to be alone. It is embedded in your very nature, the importance of being seen and heard. It is part of who you are as a person. Michael Nichols said it very well. The need to be heard, which is something we ordinarily take for granted, turns out to be one of the most powerful motives in human nature. Being listened to is the medium through which we discover ourselves as understandable and acceptable or not. The power that you have to shape someone's identity simply through listening to them is incredible. And as followers of Jesus, I want to suggest that we do not have a mission to just go out and listen to people so that they can feel good about themselves and move on. But we want to listen to people so that we can connect them to the God who made them, the one who said, it is not good for you to be alone. People are made to be connected with God and with each other. And this series, guys, is about listening, but it's ultimately about love. It's ultimately about how to love people well. This is not a series about psychology. It's not a series where we try to force the Bible to say certain things that it wasn't trying to say. This is a series about loving other people well and connecting them to the care and compassion of Jesus. And that will transform them. It was the German philosopher and theologian Paul Tillich who said the first duty of love is to listen. In other words, listening is a key pathway to loving others in the way that Jesus models love to us. And to that end, we're going to be spending the next 4 weeks in this series, The Art of Listening. The goal is to equip you with practical skills and the wisdom of what Scripture says makes a good listener, how we can tap into this wisdom and live this out with other people. But before we get to the skills, we have to set up the foundation. We have to connect with the heart of God. We have to cultivate the heart of Jesus within us, because point number 1 is that good listening begins with compassion and presence. This is where it all starts. This is Matthew 9, where it says, Jesus traveled through all the towns and villages of this certain area, and he was teaching in the synagogues and announcing the good news about the kingdom, and he healed every kind of disease and illness. And when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were confused and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Jesus has compassion on the crowds. And to the Greeks, this word for compassion, it had a very somatic sense. It was in your body because it was the same word that they used to describe your bowels, because that's where compassion was felt. Jesus had a gut level feel for these people. He felt compassion for them. It wasn't just cognitive. He felt it. When he saw people, they grabbed him in the gut. They moved him. And the reason that he has this compassion, it says, is because he perceives the people as confused and helpless. And you could read the passage and walk away with a good understanding, but this is one of those very few instances where our English Bibles, that they do such a great job translating these ancient texts, but this is one of the times when it just doesn't quite capture the power behind the words that were used here. Because these words aren't just describing people who were spiritually and cognitively far away from Jesus. These words were describing people who were oppressed, people who were exhausted, people who felt abandoned, people who lacked direction and lacked hope. The first word translated as confused here, it's a word that means to be flayed or skinned. It was an intense word, and the idea is that Jesus felt gut-level compassion for the people who were rubbed raw by life itself. They were spiritually flayed. They were left bare and exposed to the elements, and it was painful. And the word helpless means to be thrown aside. Like these people were used up and then thrown like garbage, like trash. They were abandoned. They were neglected. They were abused. They were mistreated. And these are the people that Jesus had compassion for. One commentator said a good modern translation of the people that Jesus had compassion for were those who were barely making it. Jesus looked out at the crowd and he sees you in this room who feel like I'm just barely getting by. And he has compassion. And this compassion moves him. He saw people like a sheep without a shepherd. This was religious language he was pulling on the Old Testament prophet Ezekiel, who described a time in religious history when it was so bad that the religious leaders were so oppressive, they were abusing the people that they were meant to be caring for. And God was grieving over this. He was hurt. He was frustrated because his words were being misused. Because religious leaders were demanding more from the people they were serving than they were giving to them. And Jesus looks at the crowd like this, and he doesn't evaluate their religious or political leanings. He doesn't say, well, what's your history, and have you done all this stuff that I don't like? He just has compassion. He has compassion for people that were sold the lie of the secular life. And it moves him, and it moves him towards them in love. Like, this is critical. He doesn't just have compassion and say, oh, that really sucks. Gosh, man, this is a wash. Like, forget it. Why did I even try? No, he says, I want to do something about this. I want to move towards them and love them. It was one commentator, Frederick Dale Bruner, he said, mission is not motivated by Jesus' disgust for people because they were such sinners. Mission is motivated by the more appealing fact of Jesus' compassion. Jesus had a way of seeing the person underneath their circumstance, of being present with people's suffering. And I wonder for you, do you have compassion for other people when they are suffering? When you look out at people in the workplace, or you're out in public and you see people, or you've got extended family that comes over for a holiday, do you see them through the lens of compassion and love that Jesus had? When you interact with people, what do you see? When you interact with the person, the neighbor maybe, who they differ from you politically, maybe you could tell that they've put their whole hope in a political system. When you look at them, do you judge them for their beliefs and think, oh, they're so wrong? They're just off. I've got it figured out. Or do you have compassion? Do you see someone who was sold a whole system of thought, who was sold a lie, promised results, and they've placed their entire security and identity into that one system? Do you see that person? And do you imagine how terrifying it would be? And do you have compassion that actually moves you to interact with that person and talk to them about the hope that you have that transcends a political system? When someone differs from you theologically, do you feel defensive? Do you feel like, oh gosh, how could you believe that? That's not what the Bible teaches. Or do you see the person underneath the beliefs? Do you see the person who they are just trying to put together a system of theology that makes sense to them based on their storyline, one that gives them comfort and hope? Are you willing to engage that story? Are you willing to ask about the experiences that shaped their beliefs in the first place? When you meet someone who shares their struggles with you, do you start to think to yourself, man, I wonder what you did to bring that on? I wonder how you're actually at fault here. You're kind of just playing the victim. I wonder what you did, because bad things don't happen to good people. Or do you actually enter into their suffering? Do you have compassion for what they're going through? This is the question. The compassion from God moves us towards people. It sparks something in us that says, I want to hear their story. I want to show love to them. And this is our entire model for how to be a good listener. It's based on Jesus, and it's based on his incarnation. When Jesus entered into the human world, this is our model for listening, because Jesus is God with us. This is where it starts. He has never left us alone in our suffering. God did not remain distant from the world. He made it. Things fell apart, and yet he was involved. He was a nurturing, caring parent to us. And Jesus enters into our world. He doesn't leave us to fend for ourselves. He is God with us. He is present with us. He enters into our suffering. He meets us where we are. He comes to our turf. And we're going to talk about this next week, how to enter into the story of other people. And then Jesus, he did not enter into the story so much so that he lost his divinity, nor did he remain too distant and not human enough to where we couldn't relate to him. Jesus was this perfect combination of close enough to be meaningfully connected and yet distant to where he didn't lose himself. He hung between his world and ours. And Jesus didn't just listen and say, oh wow, that's awful. I hope it gets better for you. He actually did something about it. Jesus brought the kingdom to bear. And this is what active listening is about. I know there's a lot of people in the world who think, I don't really want to focus on listening, because that's just about people sitting in their suffering. And that's not good. We don't want just people sitting around in their suffering. And I'm saying I don't either. That's not what we're teaching you. We're not saying be a good listener so people can just sit there and we can just validate and talk about trauma and talk about victim and talk about all this feeling stuff and not do anything about it. Listening is active. The purpose is to bring the kingdom of God to bear in that situation. But if you move too fast, you're not going to end up bringing God's kingdom. You're going to end up bringing your kingdom. And that's where we have to slow down and be careful. This is active listening for a purpose. So hang with us. If you're skeptical of listening, I get it. Hang with us and reevaluate after this series. Number 2, good listening challenges its own assumptions. In 1970, a clinical psychologist named Thomas Gordon, he created what famously became known as the 12 roadblocks to listening. And I modified these and adapted them, got them down to 9. And I want to go through them because these are so common. And I want you, as you read these, just be curious about yourself. Wonder, how often do I struggle with this? How often do I see this in our world? It's out there. Number 1, advising or directing. This is one of the biggest roadblocks to truly listening. This happens when you tell someone how overwhelmed you've been feeling at work. And they say, you need to get out of that place. And you're like, well, thanks. I wasn't asking for your advice, though. I just wanted to know, I'm not losing it here. Number 2, lecturing or teaching. Maybe you share with your parents about how useless school feels. And they say, this is valuable education. This is the foundation for the rest of your life. You need to take this seriously. This matters. And they keep telling you why it's necessary, and you're like, oh my gosh, it just doesn't feel very necessary to me. I don't need the lecture. Number 3, comparing or stealing. You tell a neighbor about the stressful work week you've had, and they say, oh, that's okay. That's nothing compared to my week. That's one of my favorites, and you're like, oh, geez, here we go. Number 4, solving or questioning. You express to your boss that your workload has been unmanageable lately. And they look at you and they say, all right, well, what's your plan to fix that? I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. I seriously am kidding on that. I promise. Number 5, judging, criticizing, blaming, or defending. Imagine you share with your spouse how hurtful it is that your teenager won't talk to you. And they look at you and they say, well, you weren't exactly around for them when they were a kid, so it's like, oh, man. Whew. Number 6, diagnosing or analyzing. You share with a friend that you've been feeling depressed lately. And they say, you know what? I bet you've got a thyroid disorder. Number 7, praising or agreeing. This is when you tell a buddy at the gym that you've been fighting with your spouse more often. And they look at you and they say, man, if I were you, I'd come. No, sorry, I messed it up. This is when you tell your buddy at the gym, the reason I've been coming here more often is I've been fighting more with my spouse, so I just need to get away. I can't handle it. And they say, that's exactly what I would do. I don't have time for that fighting stuff, man. I'd just get out of there. You're doing the right thing. That's good enough, and you move on. Number 8, reassuring or consoling. You tell a parent about your breakup, and they say, don't worry, you'll find someone else. Just try to reassure, make it better. Number 9, avoiding or denying or distracting or minimizing. So when you say to a friend, I've been feeling lonely lately, I've been struggling with this, and they go, an extrovert that's lonely? Okay. And they just use humor to deflect. All of these, what they have in common is the person listened based on an assumption. Maybe they made an assumption about what the person that they're listening to needs or what the person wants. Maybe they made an assumption about why something is happening in that person's life, or maybe there's an assumption about what should be done about the problem, but none of it is truly listening. And I think assumptions are just one of the biggest blockers to our ability to listen. Proverbs, I love Proverbs 18, says, spouting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish. James says, understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. And this verse is so used. It's like the go-to verse about listening. And on the surface, it looks like it's not really talking about assumptions. But it's very fascinating when you pair this verse with the beginning of James, when it sets up the context. Because the beginning of the book starts out like this: dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. And it starts talking about how to persevere in suffering. And when you put these verses together, you read it like this: dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. And understand this, dear brothers and sisters, you must be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to get angry. As if it's saying you must be quick to listen, especially when troubles come your way, especially when you're in a season of suffering. Because otherwise, you might start to assume a bunch of things about your suffering. You might start to assume that maybe this is God's fault. And James goes on to talk about how God's not the one tempting you. God's not evil. He's not giving you bad gifts. He's a good father. Maybe you start to think that God's not there for you. He's not present. He's left you alone to figure it out by yourself. And James says, ask God for wisdom in this place. Like, listen to him. Ask him for wisdom. Slow down. Maybe you start to think, this is all my fault. James is like, oh, if you would just be quick to listen to God in your suffering, it would counteract some of these assumptions. Job's friends in the Old Testament, they modeled what it looked like to be slow to listen and quick to speak. Job went through an intense period of suffering and loss, and everything he loved was taken away, swept out from under him. And he had some friends who were present with him for a short period of time, and all was well until they started talking. And when they started talking, we get examples of how to not listen to someone. And at one point, one of his friends says to Job, if only you would prepare your heart and lift up your hands to him in prayer. Oh, how many people have told you, maybe you're not praying enough? or some form of that when you share with them how you feel spiritually dry or distant from God, or you just feel anxious, something's bothering you, and people are like, well, what's your prayer life been like? And they start to make you feel like you're not doing enough. They say, get rid of your sins and leave all iniquity behind you, then your face will brighten with innocence. Oh, man. Imagine hearing that, the assumptions built into this. I want you to do something. I want you to look over this list of the 9 roadblocks. And I want to take a minute here. Yeah, they're all on there. I want to give you a minute to have 2 options. Option number 1 is safer, does not require talking to someone else. But I want to ask you to reflect on this list and ask yourself, which of these do I struggle with? Bring it before God. Let him teach you. Let him show you areas that you could grow to be a better listener. And option number 2, if you're feeling brave, and this is where learning really kicks in when you start to share with other people, is if you're here with some people, just turn to them and share. I don't recommend this being a time to say, I can tell you what you struggle with. If you want to have that conversation later, if you want to humbly ask, hey, what do you see in me? Where do I tend to struggle with listening? That could be powerful. But for now, reflect on this. Maybe talk to someone next to you. Share about this. Good listening begins with compassion and presence. It challenges its own assumptions. And number 3, good listening embraces curiosity. That is the key to good listening. Proverbs 18 says, fools have no interest in understanding. They only want to air their own opinions. I know you've met people like that. They don't want to know and understand what you're saying, but they want you to know and understand what they're saying. Later in the same proverb, curiosity is celebrated. It says, intelligent people are always ready to learn, ready to listen. Their ears are open for knowledge. They're curious, an insatiable appetite, a hunger for more and more and more. I want to give you some tips. These are just things that have helped me grow to become a better listener. As we round out our time today, some practical things. Tip number 1, find a framework that works for you to embrace more curiosity. I know some people, they really like RPMs. This is asking people about their relational, physical, mental, and spiritual health. And that's just a good framework to have in your head when you're meeting someone. Like, ask about their RPMs, ask about their relationships. Get curious about their mental health. Get curious about their spiritual status. Where are they at? What do they believe? Who is this person? Just get curious. Some people like GPS, your gifts, your passions, and your story. And ask people, what makes you come alive? Tell me about your story. You know, that's just such an open-ended, such a good question. I've liked the framework lately of using the questions that God asks Adam and Eve in Genesis 3. This is after Eve takes of the fruit. Sin enters the world, and we read the story, and God comes and he first asks the question, where are you? And when we read the Bible, a lot of times we think God's saying like, where are you? And I don't think he is. I think he's like, where are you? Because they're hiding. They're ashamed. And I like that question as I meet people, like, where is this person at? Where's this person at today? Where are they at spiritually? And I just ask about them. I ask about their story. And it's a way of showing that I care, showing that I'm willing to be present, showing concern, showing love. The next question God asks, who told you? Who fed you the lie? Who gave you that belief system? So I like this question because I can get curious about what does this person believe? Where did that belief come from? How did they come to feel this way about this topic? I can just get curious. Where are you? Who told you? And the third question God asks is, have you eaten from the tree? Another way of phrasing this question is, did you take your desire to that? You coped with that? Have you eaten from the tree? Because Genesis 3 says, Eve looked at the apple after she had been tempted. She looked at the fruit and she saw it was pleasing. She had a desire for it. Where did she take that desire? It wasn't back to God. She took that desire and she just went for it. I like that framework a lot, to be curious about people. Tip number 2, be curious about yourself. This is something a lot of people who aren't great at listening to other people aren't very good at listening to their own story too. Get curious about yourself. Why do you believe what you believe? Why do you hold the convictions that you hold? How has your story from the past influenced where you are in the present? Get curious about yourself, and it'll open up a way to be curious about other people as well. Number 3, notice your own reactions to people in the moment. As you're talking to people, catch yourself. Try to pay attention to yourself. Are you feeling bored when you talk to somebody? Like, what's going on? Are you lacking interest in them because you're lacking love? You can kind of challenge yourself, like, why am I feeling bored with this conversation? Are you feeling judgmental? Are you lacking compassion? If you catch yourself feeling judgmental, you can ask yourself, oh man, what's going on here? I'm noticing myself, judging this person. How can I tap into compassion? Jesus, give me compassion for this person. Help me see them through your eyes. Maybe you're feeling hurried when you're talking to somebody. Maybe that indicates that there's just a lack of margin in your life to make room for loving other people by listening to them. Maybe you're just lacking curiosity altogether, and you find yourself kind of disengaged, disinterested. I want to suggest to you that lacking curiosity about someone is a warning light that there might be an assumption at work. When you lack curiosity, there's probably an assumption that you've been caught by. And so number 4 is temporarily challenge yourself when you're talking to people to just temporarily suspend your assumptions. There's several assumptions that can grab you. Here are 10 of the most popular ones. Assuming this person is just like me. I know what they mean. Maybe you don't. I know what they want or what they need. I know their motives. I know what they're thinking. I know what they're feeling. I know what they're going to say. I know more about this topic than they do. I know how this conversation's going to go. Or maybe it's people will never understand me. That's my assumption, so I'm not going to open up. Challenge these, catch them, notice them, and try to temporarily suspend them, even if it's just for 5 minutes, 2 minutes. Suspend the assumption to ask a question. Number 5, take a stance of not knowing. This was a big deal in school for me, as they talked constantly about meeting with clients and taking a not knowing, or some would call it a one down stance. And this is where you just tell yourself, what if I don't know? What if I don't know literally anything about how this thing arose, about this client's depression or this marriage problem? What if I just don't know? And it makes you more curious and you start to ask questions. I met with a friend once who was in kind of a relationship troubled time, and they were trying to discern, do I stay with this person? What do I want? And we met and we talked, and I just said, well, what do you want? And we get to the end of the conversation, and they're like, I've talked to a lot of people about this, and you're the first person that's asked me what I want. Everybody else has just assumed that I want to be in this relationship. It's like, but when you take a not knowing stance, you start from ground zero. You're like, I don't know what they want. So you just ask people, what do you want? What do you want here? I like that. Suspend your assumptions. Take a not knowing stance. Ask open questions. Open-ended questions cannot be answered with yes or no. They're open, not closed. So when you ask a question, often if it's an open question, it will begin with the words what or how. What do you think about that? You can't say yes or no. How do you feel about fill in the blank? You can't say yes or no. So that's helpful to ask open-ended questions. We'll talk more about questions in week 4 of this series. Number 8, the phrase, tell me more. That's gold for me. Just tell me more. I want to hear more. Tell me more about that. I love that. I'll tell people a lot of times, I love that. Tell me more about it. And people don't often get that invitation to talk. And number 9, lastly, we're going to invite the band up here as we finish up. Connect everything back to prayer. I know in our blessed rhythms, B is begin with prayer, but really prayer just permeates the entire process. Imagine what it would be like is as you were listening to people, you took what they were sharing with you and you transformed it into a prayer for them. Or imagine what it would be like if you relied on Jesus more in a conversation with somebody by literally asking, God, what do you want me to ask this person? What do you want me to know about this person? You turn everything back into this prayer, and it saturates the whole process. It's incredible. And then as you learn more about people, you are better informed to be able to pray for them in ways that will truly make a difference in their life. And we've got this go and be focus. It's in your bulletin there. This is, we do go and be. It's turned into kind of a quarterly rhythm almost. Is becoming more and more frequent. And this is go and be the church. Right? Go and live out the mission of Jesus. And so this time we've done go and pray in the spring, and we did a heavy emphasis on prayer. Now we're doing go and listen. And so there's a challenge in there. Each week we'll have a challenge for you. And I just want to encourage you guys that you can do this. Even if you feel like I have no idea where to start with listening to other people, just start with compassionate curiosity. Start by caring. Ask God for his heart. And I can't wait to journey more with you together.